Hello, everybody. This is the world's greatest Bronze Age Spider-Man podcast. There's only one of us. This is Here Comes the Spider-Cast. I'm your co-host, Michael, and as always, I'm joined by...
Joshua Mervell. Today, we're going to be taking a look at Spidey comics from April of 1986.
That's right, and this is a weird occasion because we just saw Josh for the first time in the flesh 2 days ago, and it was like surreal, wasn't it, Josh?
Yeah, it's been since before the pandemic. Well, I guess like the pandemic had kind of already started, but it wasn't really in Canada yet. And we were watching Bloodshot of all things, and that was the last thing I did out in the world without a mask. Saw Bloodshot.
Yep. I think there was one point where Mike went to get like coffee in the lobby, and Josh looked at me and was like, "Should we even be here?" And I was like, "You know what? We're already here."
Yeah, it felt weird.
It was kind of scary and surreal. Yeah.
I think that was back when we thought it was just like the flu, so we didn't realize we were risking our lives.
Yeah.
But even if we did, we still would have saw Bloodshot.
No.
All right. So yeah, we also want to remind everyone this week we're also joined by G.I. Jolie. Hello, Jolie.
Woo.
Hello. And I want to say, looking into Josh's flesh in the flesh was the weirdest thing I've ever... It was weird. Tell them. I couldn't stop staring at your face.
Yeah. It was... Jolie kept looking over like, it's weird looking at you.
She said that to me too, but she sees me all the time. Anyway.
Right, yeah.
I mean, it's a good face, Josh.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
And your head's not that big. I know that you say it's huge, but it's like... it's a normal size.
That's the nicest thing anybody's ever said to me. It's not that big.
Yeah.
Backhanded compliment.
Okay, we've also got returning co-host Bex Luthor. Thanks for joining us, Bex.
Hi. I wasn't there when you all got together, but that's not for any reason other than I don't go outside, so...
One day we'll see you again.
No one will ever see me in person. I am a mystery now. I'm never going outside now that I don't have to.
All
they
right,
deliver Uber Eats right to your door, and you don't even have to say anything to anybody anymore.
That's true. There's an option to just like leave it there.
So I don't have to talk to anyone in real life ever again.
There's advantages to that, for sure. Okay, we also want to welcome return special guest, Adam Peltier. Thank you for joining us, Adam.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, everyone. I wish I could say something about your face, Josh. I've only seen it, sporadically. And I feel ambivalent about it, I guess.
Yeah, that's pretty much how I feel. I've seen it for 25 years.
Adam, how many times have you been on our show now?
Actually, because dates and time mean nothing to me since the pandemic, I'm not really sure. I want to say this is my third time on the Talkie Talk.
Yeah. Really? Well, guess what? I'm going to correct you and say it's probably closer to 4 times because I have a giant database that keeps track of how many times you've been on the show, and your name shows up actually 5 times.
So everybody's wrong.
Oh, really? Has it been 5?
No, I'm wrong. It's not 5. No, it's because I put your name twice sometimes. So it's probably 4.
Okay.
But
I was only
4.
there 1.5 times.
Yeah.
You have this amazing, accurate database. Oh, never mind. I fucked it up.
Yeah, that's messed up.
It's just 4. I mean, 3. I mean, 5?
Look, this is accurate. Look, May 6th, 2020. And then again with David Constantino, and then November 4th, and then January 16th, and now this time.
Oh, wow. Those innocent times back in 2020.
Did we talk about... I'm trying to remember back to like all the 90 plus episodes we've done. Did we talk about the issue of the Thing at the amusement park?
We did Marvel Team Up 128, so that was probably it. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
And then you did Go ahead.
There was a giant rat man at one point. I know that.
Right.
Oh, what's his name? Vermin.
Right.
Ratso.
Awesome.
Vermin.
Yeah, Vermin. Cool name. Anyway.
Yeah, cool.
So yeah,
Very
this
cool.
This week we're not talking about Vermin.
Yeah,
we are talking about
I'm going to be starting off with the Web of Spider-Man number 13. This is a pretty fun issue. The cover is it's pretty fun. We've got Spidey holding J. Jonah Jameson by like the scruff of his shirt and raising a fist to him. And we've got like the headline that's kind of our starter for this issue. As Spidey is like swinging through the city and saving this guy as he's about to get hit by a semi-truck. We're seeing snippets from a newspaper, and we find out later it is from the Daily Bugle, of this event. And the newspaper is not accurate to exactly what happens, and we see that it's describing how Spider-Man has like intimidated the man into the street to run in front of the truck, and some witnesses say that he even grabbed the truck and scooted along to try to, you know, really squish him and finish him off and blah, 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 blah. But what we see is this guy, Buddy Corbett, he runs out to the street, gets hit by a truck, and is in the hospital. And after the newspaper bit kind of ends, we see that the crowd is kind of divided. Some people are really happy that, you know, he was able to jump in and save him. Other people are really angry and they're calling him a mutant. And some of them are like, you know, talking about how the Bugle is right and he's a menace. And we see that the public perception for Spider-Man is not so hot right now. We cut over to J. Jonah Jameson as he's writing this paper, and we cut to the guy in the hospital, and all these news reporters are there, and JJ and Peter go in to take pictures and to interview him. And the guy is kind of really not sure what to do. He's worried about his medical bills, and he just wants to kind of get out of the hospital as quickly as possible. JJ is like trying to kind of like manipulate him into saying that Peter pushed him Spider-Man pushed him in front of the truck. After that, we kind of get a couple of other reporters from NBC News, and they decide to play the clip of the businessman talking about how Spider-Man is a menace rather than this homeless woman who says that he was a hero and saved the day, who was actually there during the scene of the crime due to time. And that further kind of pushes public reception into the gutter. Ben Urich is pretty suspicious of this, so he decides to kind of do his own research and contact somebody from the police and ask him to run some records on the Buddy Corbett guy, the guy that got hit. We cut over to a bank robbery, and Spidey comes in and saves the day, but everybody in the bank is kind of upset because the bank robbers decided to blow up the ATM with dynamite, and it ruined all of the money, so they were just going to run away and not, you know, really cause a scene, where Spider-Man jumps in and stops them, and the whole crowd is like against him. And he even takes note that his spider sense went off, which meant that one of them was actually going to put him in danger and actually harm him. So he goes back to his place, and he's kind of reflecting, and he sees on the news the story being run of the businessman talking bad about him, and he's kind of had it at this point. So he goes in and confronts J. Jonah Jameson, and it's this really great scene where he kind of locks him into his office and confronts him about how he's a bully, and he's always talking about how he's a menace and he's a bad guy, but he saved JJ countless times, his son, his family, his wife, him. So he's kind of like, what the heck? Like, why do you keep doing this? And J. Jonah Jameson kind of confronts him and says, you know, either I pushed you to this point and you are a menace, or you've been a menace this whole time and I was right. So either way, right now you're a menace. So Peter kind of like brushes it off and leaves. And it turns out that they get the police report back from Ben, and the guy, Buddy Corbett, was actually a con artist, and he goes from city to city with different names to try to make money, and Spider-Man was right. So J. Jonah Jameson decides to run the story, correcting the fact that Spider-Man did something bad, and he actually ended up saving the day. And hopefully this would kind of change public's reception on Spider-Man. Yeah, I thought it was a pretty fun story. There's really no like big major bad guy in this, I guess, besides Buddy. But it's a really great character study of both JJ and Peter and their kind of dynamic with each other.
Right, and we should quickly point out that Web of Spider-Man has kind of gained a reputation as a fill-in. Like, they really have no regular writer, no regular artist. Every issue is completely different. Whereas Amazing has kind of like the continuing ongoing saga of Spider-Man and the Hobgoblin and all the villains. And then Peter Parker is like the ongoing saga of Spider-Man and like hooligans and whoever. This is kind of a different story every issue. I definitely appreciate that it's done in one, and I think it's good for that reason. But I think it was going for something a little bit more than it accomplished, but I still think it's really good. But I want to know what Adam, what you think of this issue. Web of Spider-Man number 13. What's your opinion?
In terms of the actual story, I think this was probably the strongest, or one of the strongest of the stories we've read. Again, like Josh was saying, that dynamic between Peter Parker, Spider-Man, and J. Jonah Jameson, I thought that was done very well. I think actually having reflection where Spider-Man is having a point where he is acknowledging maybe he is a bit of a menace, and maybe there is some truth to what Jonah is publicizing, is actually a oddly profound character moment for Peter. Something I'm not accustomed to in the past few episodes that I've participated in. There hasn't been too much reflection of Peter on his nature and how he goes out to solve crimes, and I actually really appreciated that. On the other hand, I have to say I was not a fan of the art by any stretch of the imagination. I feel a little bit bad saying this because I know some people actually enjoy the pencils by Mike Harris. I felt the body proportions and the character models were all over the place here, to the point where it became absolutely distracting. Even on the second page where we have Buddy looking up at the sky, I don't know what's happened. Something may have bit him. He may be on an acid trip from his super dilated eyes, and then his Gumby style running across the street in the next panel below. I found the art very distracting, I'll put it that way, which is a shame because this had some of the most mature character work in a Spider-Man comic that I think I've ever read, to be honest.
Well, before we jump to anyone else, I want to know, you talked about Mike Harris's pencils. What about Kyle Baker's inks?
I think the inking was done really well. I think the inking actually saved a bit of the work. Now, I have criticism sometimes where the inking is done too heavily in these like mid-80 periods of comics, in the mainstream comics in particular, where it muddies up the pencils and it's hard to distinguish backgrounds and characters. I think it set a mood and a more serious tone for this book, and I think it did actually cover up some of the more egregious art failings of the pencils. There's one more point I'm just going to bring up relating to the art. It's near the very end of the issue where Robbie is exiting J. Jonah's office, and his arms are not only contorted in a very odd way.
Yeah, good point.
It kind of looks like, I'm not sure if you remember those Transformer toys from the mid-'80s where there would...
Transformers, what's that?
Sorry, well, yeah, you would not know about that, yeah. And their arms are kind of, like, stuck in this, like...
mid-transformation, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, the lever's broke, I can't connect it, and it looks like he can't transform to his final form. I don't know. Great shadow work, though. I do really appreciate the inking, giving it a bit of a darker tone. I'm interested to hear what other people have to say about the ink work, because this might just be me enjoying it, but I'd like to hear everyone else's opinion on the matter.
All right, let's jump to G.I. Jolie. What's your opinion on this issue, G.I. Jolie?
I agree with Adam. It is definitely one of the most mature like handlings of character development I've ever read in Spider-Man. Or maybe, I wouldn't say in comics, but for sure Spider-Man up to this point. I really enjoyed this book. It was a really great character study. I have my own favorite parts too. But like Adam said, like even I really enjoyed the inking. There's just something different about this book. It didn't feel like Spider-Man. It felt like probably because there wasn't like some supernatural weird baddie in a costume. But it felt more like a television show.
Right.
Like a dramatic take on Spidey. That like not a CW Spidey, and maybe not like another network, but
Netflix Spidey.
Yeah, like not an HBO Spidey, but like a Netflix Spidey.
An Amazon Prime Spidey.
Actually, yeah. Do you know what? The inks made it very Amazon Prime.
Right.
But I think you're totally right, though. It does kind of have that like Daredevil feel at times, like Netflix's Daredevil. Where
there's this one. Sorry, Josh.
No, go ahead.
Oh well, there's this one really great scene. I think it was after Spidey comes in, like crashes into JJJ's office, and like threatens him. Like he's had enough, and I'm like, why didn't he do this before? This man has been on his ass all the time. I would have been this like, and he's this mad now. Good for him. And then Robbie walks in, and there's this sort of back and forth between him and Robbie that like it tells me more about their two characters as men, as co-workers, as newspaper men than I've ever. It gave me more of that in this one page than I've ever read in all of Spider-Man.
Oh, this is music to my ears, folks. But anyway, Bex Luthor, what do you think?
I hated it.
Come on.
No, it was great. I only exist to make Mike upset. That's my role on this podcast.
Working.
No, I really enjoyed. I was like, finally Webb is trying to figure out, maybe it wants to be a character study instead of whatever garbled mess it's been previous to that.
Yeah.
It sets it up with such a simple, like, Spidey stopping a truck from hitting a guy, and then all of a sudden it goes into Spider-Man versus the people of New York, Spider-Man versus the press, and it really, like, when he's sitting in his apartment and he's like lamenting over all of his burned belongings and his shredded red and blue suit, it just is like, you just feel for the guy. Like, everyone is against him. He calls Mary Jane, gets nothing from her because she doesn't ever have anything useful to say lately, it seems like. And it turns out it's all for nothing. Like, obviously he was trying to save this guy, and the guy ran into a truck, and none of it really mattered. And it's just, I don't know. I don't really have anything else interesting to say that hasn't already been said, really, I guess. I did like when he kicked into the window and just like shattered it. Like, dude, right. You work there.
It's coming out of your paycheck.
Yeah.
It's so dramatic. Like, I love when Peter is as dramatic as he is, because deep down he will always be a 16-year-old high school boy getting bullied, and this time it just happens to be getting bullied by the media, and he just is so dramatic and whiny about it, and I love it.
I feel like, I back in the 80s, as you guys know, there was only 2 people on Earth that read comics, and I was one of them. No one else read comics, at least in my high school. And I feel like that validation you feel when all of a sudden, you know how like now everyone likes Avengers and X-Men and Spider-Man, and they all have the DVDs on their shelves, and you're like, yeah, I've been saying that for 20 years. That's exactly how I feel, where you finally, like, this is a random issue of Web of Spider-Man that no one's mentioned in 30 years. There's no consequences to the story, but this is exactly why I loved Spidey when I was 12 years old, right? Stories like this. Like nothing, like the story ends, we never ever go back to it, nothing consequential happens, but the writing's good, the art's sort of good, it offers something unique, it's done in one, and yeah, I love this issue. I absolutely love it.
If I may,
yeah,
I just want to say that I think you're on point with this, Mike, because far too often in superhero comics, creators try to raise stakes to the point where there's no tension. It doesn't matter, the most powerful villains come to face a superhero. In the end, you know the hero's going to survive because there's solicitations for another dozen issues for another year.
Yep.
What really hooks you is what hooks you for any medium, good storytelling. And this is what this issue delivered far beyond anything else I've read as part of this podcast. Great storytelling. And it's only fitting that after this, you know, we're going to be talking about a comic which does exactly what I mentioned. But, we'll save that for a minute from now, but I just think this is a great example that I think contemporary creators and writers could use as a jumping point to say, what do we do with Spider-Man? No, you don't need to make him make deals with the devil or have weird bastard clone children. No, give him interesting character development, and then people will care.
You know, I'm going to add to that. Exactly, and say that, oh God, it goes so much bigger than that. Even you're right. It's like and this is why when I think most of people from our generation complain about modern comics, we kind of get accused by Becca of being old men shouting at clouds and okay boomer and all this stuff. But the truth is that the stakes...
I don't think I said that.
You said okay boomer, but it was about something different. But anyway...
But he's not bitter.
Yeah. But it's like, no, the stakes don't need to be high. The storytelling style doesn't need to change. And obviously, Becca, no, you didn't specifically talk about this. But I'm just saying that there is a difference between this type of storytelling and the modern way of stories. And that's why if I'm reading a comic and it says... you have to pick up 17 other comics to understand, you know, where this story fits in. I just stop buying. I stop reading. And
do you mean like kind of like how Secret Wars 2 happened?
I think Secret Wars 2 probably started that, right? Like it partially started it.
Because this is because I don't know. I feel the same way with these comics. A lot of them are, oh, you got to figure out what's going on. Oh, go get this one. Go get this one.
Right.
I don't think it's necessarily this generation of comics versus that generation of comics. I think it's just that this is like a hidden gem, just like I'm sure there are plenty in current modern comics. These one-off fill-in stories just offer an opportunity to tell these stories that are more character studies and rather these big overarching events that are happening. They have to tell a story in just this one issue. So what are they going to focus on? Are they going to bring in this big bad guy to like raise the stakes? No, they're going to make it something smaller that they can tell in this one story. Maybe they won't have a villain at all. Maybe this will just be about J. Jonah Jameson and his relationship with Spider-Man, the figure. And I love it. And I think that's what makes this comic so good.
Well, I want to point out, you're right. It's not necessarily like a 80s versus now thing. It's more of a specific post 1985 all comics, all superhero comics versus pre 1985. And what I mean is that, you know, growing up reading, say, G.I. Joe or Transformers or even Spider-Man, since there was no internet and there was almost no press, you really had no idea what was coming next, right? So you'd go to the store and you'd buy X-Men and you had no idea what was going to happen in the next issue. Or you know, so you just go there and it's not like you'd go, oh, well, I am going to read this issue because it has Mr. Sinister, but I'm not going to read this one because it has Magneto. You just bought them all, right? And if it was good, you'd continue, and if it was bad, you'd stop. And if you compare it to a TV show, I mean, every week there's a new episode of a TV show, and they don't usually hype specific episodes. They kind of just release them and everyone watches them and they react. But the way that comics have started to become since probably Secret Wars is they'll hype up these crossovers and these storylines, and it's all based on, like Adam was saying, the stakes of like, oh my God, something's going to happen. It's going to change and let's talk about Spider-Man. It's going to change Spider-Man's life forever. His parents are back. Oh, but they're clones. Oh, wait a minute. Spider-Man's a clone. Oh, wait a minute. Peter Parker's not even the real Spider-Man. And it's like my whole, 20s, I avoided Spider-Man because of that. And then it seems like every once in a while they'll try to bring it back down to earth with more small-scale stories, but then they eventually, maybe sales are low or whatever, and they just go right back to that hype machine, And I can't get into that. And again, like you said, Josh, no, I'm definitely not criticizing all modern comics, because there's a lot of hidden gems, but I just think that there's a certain I don't want to call them it's not a conspiracy, but it's like there's a certain type of executive at Disney or Warner that's like, okay, guys, this isn't working. Let's get back to the mega crossovers because we know those sell. We'll hype it up. We'll put billboards up. And at the end of the day, I just don't care about that stuff. I'd rather just read something like this, Mm-hmm. But anyway.
Okay, boomer.
I want to say quickly what I was going to say earlier was that it does remind me of Rashomon, and because I've read this story before, and I thought that's more where it was going, where we were going to see like 5 different points of view about how it opened, where it wasn't so much that. So I feel like it might have lost. I mean, again, maybe that's just my expectation. Maybe that's not what the writer was trying to do. But I felt like that's where it was going, and I didn't quite accomplish that. But for what it did accomplish, I thought it was really good. And I want to point out that Mike Harris, I think he was the same guy that drew that. Remember the Smithville Thunderbolt two-parter, where the art was just horrendous? So I think it shows the strength of Kyle Baker to really fix this art, because he was really one of the best inkers in the industry at this point. And I think he made the art a lot better than it was originally. However, did you guys notice there was at least 1 or 2 panels that were clearly inked by other people?
No.
Like, if you go to Digital 16, look at the bottom left panel of Mary Jane Watson. It looks like it's John Romita Sr. or somebody.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. And then there's another one that's really, really... okay, go to Digital 21. Look at J. Jonah Jameson's face on the left, and look at it on the right. 2 completely different inkers.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm thinking that for some reason, who knows? Because at this time, I think John Romita Sr. was the art director of Marvel. Something happened in that second panel. They didn't like it, so he went in and his team fixed it or whatever. And that's what I think happened. But anyway, just wondering if you guys noticed that. But anyway.
Yeah, I actually didn't notice that.
Huh. So anyway,
I was too distracted from the pain of Amazing Spider-Man 275, but...
We'll talk about that in a minute. Okay, so I definitely recommend this issue. Adam, do you recommend it?
Oh, yeah, highly.
Awesome. G.I. Julie, do you recommend it?
Absolutely. Like nothing before this. I will hand this to other people.
Awesome. Josh?
Yeah, it was fantastic. I think it was one of my favorite issues we've read on the podcast.
Bex Luthor.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's actually, I think we can all kind of agree on this one, which I don't think has happened in a while.
That's true. Yeah, good point.
And nothing horrifically offensive, so.
Interesting.
Don't worry, it's coming.
Yeah.
Anyways, Amazing Spider-Man.
Okay, on that note, we're going to jump to Amazing Spider-Man 275. And Bex Luthor, I believe you're summarizing this one, right?
Yeah, I hate myself, so sure. Let's do it.
Go ahead.
Sorry. Yep. Okay. Sorry, I just got a text message that there's been suspicious activity on my Netflix account. I don't use my own Netflix account. I use somebody else's, so.
See, you're probably the suspicious activity.
It's me! I was the villain. So, you know, Amazing 275. Really awesome cover, honestly, to start off with. But I will say, as soon as I opened the comic to read it, I was like, oh, cool, Hobgoblin's back. And then it's like, in this issue, the origin of Spider-Man. Cool. You know, because it's been a while since we've heard about what happened to Uncle Ben. Maybe like a couple minutes. So, Can't wait to read about that again. So it just starts off with the Hobgoblin, and he's got some new toys that he's gotten from the Rose, I guess. And he can't wait to try them out on Spider-Man. So we go back over to who is it? It's Nathan's returning home right after he got mugged in an alleyway by goons. But yeah, so they throw him like a big old surprise party. And something interesting that I'll talk about later too when we're talking about it. But Nathan's like, I thought you'd be busy with work, Peter. Like, you should be busy at work. And meanwhile, he's always on Peter about not being there, but whatever. So Mary Jane's there, and then they're just celebrating that he's back. We go back to Hobgoblin, who is testing out his new toys on stuff, and then we're in Flash Thompson's apartment. And Shashan, she's just been having some trouble with Flash, so she's gonna call a friend and get some advice. And Flash freaks out because obviously she can't be talking to other men. Who does she think she is? Him? Because Flash Thompson's been secretly seeing Betty Leeds for the last several months. So he accuses her of cheating on him, does something, and storms out, leaves her crying. So I didn't know that this was a thing that happened, but if I've ever said anything positive about Flash Thompson, I take it back. We go back over. Mary Jane is giving some more not so useful advice to Peter, who's deciding that he's going to give up being Spider-Man for the umpteenth time. And he even says it. He's like, I've given up being Spider-Man before, but this time I mean it. Which means he definitely doesn't mean it. And it's weird because Mary Jane is like weird about it. Because normally she'd be like, yeah, get rid. I don't like Spider-Man. I don't like that you're Spider-Man. Then we could be together. But she doesn't want him to give up being Spider-Man. And then he decides, he's like, you know what, Mary Jane? I've never told you about why I became Spider-Man, have I? And then I roll my eyes and go, oh joy! I can't wait to read this again for the umpteenth time. So it's just Peter Parker's origin story. He is bullied. Uncle Ben's there, Aunt May's there, he is bullied some more, spider bites, jumps out of the way of the car, Crusher Hogan wrestling match, Aunt May and Uncle Ben are the best parents in the world, Spider-Man goes on TV. I feel like I don't even need to say any of this at this point. We all know this story. And then he lets the robber go. And it turns out that the robber's is the one that ends up shooting Uncle Ben. And responsibility,
What?
something. I know! Crazy. So that's why he's Spider-Man, Mary Jane. And she, for some reason, is still next to him and didn't go, oh, and leave. Which is what I would have done. And then he's just regaling all the mistakes he made. Gwen Stacy dying, which wasn't his fault. Nathan getting beat up, which also wasn't his fault. Jean DeWolf, which definitely wasn't his fault. But he's blaming himself for all of these things because, of course, he can't, and Mary Jane's sad about it. So then we go back to the Bugle, and Betty is upset because she can't choose between her husband and Flash Thompson, who's just a great guy, just phenomenal stand-up man. Betty, throw both men out. They're both trash. So Ned is at Flash Thompson's apartment and he's looking for him, and Shashan is making the incredibly difficult and smart decision to just get up and leave him. Thank God. 10 out of 10 for her. Ned and Flash run into each other in the street. Ned gets his ass kicked. And then now we're back to Hobgoblin trying to get Spider-Man to come out of hiding, so he takes hostage, which just happens to be Shashan. It's a big city, but there's only like 5 people in it. So Peter sees this on the news, and he gets just this incredible wave of responsibility after spending a half an issue talking about how he doesn't want to be Spider-Man, so he dresses up as Spider-Man to go be Spider-Man. saves the day, and then on the last page gets hit by the hobgoblin, and what happens? That was this issue. Can you tell how I loved it?
But wait, I have to point out one thing. You may dismiss the recap of the origin of Spider-Man, but for people in 1986, it was a joy to see this reprint because there was no way to read the original story by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko unless you had $52,000. So I don't mind this reprint. I don't know if you realize
this was the first reprinting.
Yeah. This is the first time it was reprinted?
Not the first time, but there was no way to get it unless you know what? It was maybe the second or third, but at the same time, if you're a kid buying comics every week, there was no way, there was no trade paperback, there was no graphic novel, there was obviously no digital, right? So,
I feel like now if you walk by a stand of comics, the person selling them, it begging you, like, please take this reprint, please.
Probably, yeah.
It recounts how Uncle Ben died. Exactly.
Don't you want to know, kid?
But, I mean, we've seen, maybe not the exact reprinting of this, but we've got the gist of it from the last every issue.
Yeah, I know. But, it's an important anniversary. It's the 275th issue, so... But anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, yay! What anniversary is that? Is that, the... throw it in the garbage anniversary?
Okay, anyway.
Flaming dumpster anniversary.
Paper.
So let's just keep our review focused on the main story here. G.I. Jolie, what did you think about the main story?
The art was good. Yep. Do you know what? What? Okay, fine. It's just kind of the same Spidey level crap that we've been dealing with.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's there's some personal drama that Peter and his friends are going through, and it's just more whining and complaining that we were accustomed to hearing from Peter, and more sort of petting and poor Petering from Mary Jane, and then you shoehorn a villain in it, and then you throw in and to have thrown in just a reprint, it's exhausting and cheap.
Yeah, I'm with you so far.
It made for an easier read. I just skipped the whole thing. Went right back to the quote main story. Mm-hmm. Do you know what though? I like that. I don't like how it culminated into the beating of Shashan, but I mean, how are we gonna get rid of Flash? Really? Not Barry Allen. Sorry, I mean Flash. I keep calling him the Flash, but I mean total a-hole who beats women, Flash Thompson. Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of glad that this is sort of over now. Was it 20 of our episodes ago that you were they're trying to write Ned Leeds as Hobgoblin?
Well, I didn't want to spoil it, but yes, this writer, Tom DeFalco, is writing Ned Leeds as the Hobgoblin, and that is exactly why Hobgoblin kidnaps, what's her name? Shashan?
Shashan.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's exactly why. It's not just a coincidence, so yeah.
Well,
but sorry, Adam, we spoiled it.
Spoilers.
What? I wasn't paying attention. It's okay.
Okay.
No, I know. I don't remember who the Hobgoblin actually was because it got so convoluted in the end, but I know that's who it was intended to be.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I also want to quickly point out that if you read the origin story reprinted, Flash Thompson's in that story. Flash Thompson is the one that is bullying Peter Parker. It's the same guy, so... He always was, a bully, and then Peter Parker... Then they kind of became friends, and then they kind of had, a couple issues ago, they kind of had, a little bit of a... they're friends, right? And Flash Thompson kind of explained his actions, and he basically said that he didn't think he was a bully. He thought Peter Parker was an asshole. And, I was kind of taking Flash Thompson's side, and then this issue, he punched his girlfriend in the face. I'm back on the side of Peter Parker. But anyway.
It always sucks. It always sucks when this happens in comics because it makes me hate the character, right? But it's not the character that I dislike; it's the writer.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Good point.
Because afterwards they try to erase that, right? They try to erase that from history, and that character never did that, or they just kind of like turn a blind eye to it, right?
Right.
So later on, I don't hate Flash because he's in the comics still. He becomes Venom, right? Like he's like he's a character. It really sucks when stuff like this happens because it's really dated and in poor taste, and like, why was this needed? Like, it literally adds a nothing. They got into a fight. He could have just stormed off.
Right.
It's nothing. It's ugh.
It's as they say, it kind of breaks the toys, right? Like, or there's an expression where they talk about that. But anyway, yeah, Jolie, what were you gonna say?
Well, the fact that he went back to his apartment and then Shashan wasn't there, her life was currently in peril. And he's like, what a good for nothing bee. I should have known she wasn't going to be here. Letting me down again. Well, you know what? You just backhanded her like 25 minutes ago. You really think she's going to be there for your stupid ass?
Right.
I'm not mad about it.
If anything good has come from this horrible, stupid thing that didn't need to happen, it was Shashan being like, oh, nah, F this, I'm out. Immediately. Because leaving these kinds of relationships is difficult, challenging, emotionally manipulative, like awful. And she was like, nope, I'm better than this, fuck off, like immediately. So good for her. Sucks that she gets kidnapped immediately, but you know.
Well, and the other thing I want to say is that besides that scene kind of ruining Flash Thompson, as Josh said, written by Tom DeFalco, I don't know. I think the formula of Amazing Spider-Man is starting to wear thin on me. Like, I do appreciate it's fun and it's fast moving and it's a classic Marvel style, but it is starting to wear thin, I think, at this point. And like the way that the story opens up with Hobgoblin just seemingly talking to no one about his new doohickeys, then 3 pages later you're like, oh, he's talking to the Rose, I get it, okay. And I don't know, it just feels very tired, I guess you could say. I don't know, Adam, have you given your full review yet?
I don't think I need to.
Okay. What do you think?
I'll just quickly say my thoughts have been echoed by everyone else. The main story is redundant. I've seen the Hobgoblin stuff before. I've seen the Peter self-doubt stuff before. The whole thing where the Gwen Stacy falling from the bridge is revisited. In this case with Shashan being dropped by the Hobgoblin. It's all stuff I've seen before in previous issues and stuff that would be repeated ad nauseum in future issues. This contributes nothing.
Right.
And the only thing, I agree with Mike, I think at the time it may have been novel to get your hands on something that reprinted Amazing Fantasy 15, but honestly, if this is a big anniversary and you're resorting to a clips show, and this is the first time I've seen a clip show in a comic format, there's something wrong. And also the whole situation with the abuse against Shashan, like, not only is that disgusting, but who is this comic for? At this time, it was being written for children, young adults. Do we really need to have that type of horrible abuse of women being represented in a way that I don't think is that constructive? Shashan doesn't really do much to assert herself aside from leave Flash, and then she's just victimized again, literally, by being kidnapped maybe 5 minutes after walking out the door. I feel like this was a waste, this whole thing.
You know, I just got to say something, because I posted this to Facebook, that little scene, and someone pointed out, wow, good thing Flash doesn't think of himself as a bully. Because we did just review recently where where he had that scene where he explained to Peter Parker, he's like, I wasn't a bully. And he had me convinced. I'm like, I'm on Flash Thompson's side. Anyway.
And then he hits his girlfriend and also immediately punches Ned Leeds in the face in the middle of the road too afterwards.
Right.
He hits 2 people in like 10 minutes. And the flashback to Peter's origin just showcases how much of a dick Flash is. I know, it's like Whiplash. We had that whole comic a little bit ago where he was talking about how he wasn't a bully and how like it was just Peter's perspective and he's just a regular dude, and it's like, I disagree.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
One
One more thing I would want to add to this, because this is so out of character for Peter. He actually says he's not going to get involved when he sees Shoshan is being kidnapped. And he says, and I quote, "Why me? The city is full of the costume jerks, like the Avengers and the Fantastic Four." And so Mary Jane has to prod him to go and save her by saying, "Where's your sense of responsibility now?" In spite of the fact he just recapped over 12 pages the fact that by not being responsible, he led to his uncle's death, and it's still something that haunts him to this day. What the hey?
Yeah, it's very. I guess soap operatic, like very forced. Like forced melodrama. Like it's like a checklist. Okay, we got to have him remember Gwen Stacy. We got to have him feel guilty. We got to do this, and it's just a checklist. Jolie, were you gonna say something?
Well, yeah, I mean, sure. I get it. If he is exhausted by being painted as a villain and he just saw some person being kidnapped by the hobgoblin, I can understand maybe him saying, well, why does it always have to be me? I get persecuted whatever I do. This is his friend. Shoshan is a person...
I think on the news it wasn't shown who it was, and I think they even said it was an unnamed person. And then when he shows up, he goes, "Oh my God, Shoshan!" So, yeah, I think he doesn't know until he shows up.
Well, it's a good thing he showed up, because then he would have had more spider guilt. Could you imagine if she died?
Yeah,
he would just. He would just
another clip for the show.
Yep.
I also want to point out, if we're looking for someone to blame, everyone go to digital page 31. Becca, I know you don't have the page numbers, but it's the full page splash of Hobgoblin with Shoshan on his Hoblin glider, and Spidey is swinging in from the top. You know that page?
Yeah.
So the guy in the foreground is Tom DeFalco. The blonde guy's Ron Frenz, and I believe the black dude with the shades is Jim Owsley. So there are the culprits. Anyway, just thought I'd point that out.
Interesting.
Losers.
Okay. Anyway, go ahead.
There's only one good thing from this comic, and it's that Mary Jane's finally getting out of her own ass about Peter being Spider-Man, and the fact that that's the part that she loves about him. So
Right.
maybe she can stop being whiny about it.
Also, Spider-Man gets finger blasted.
Yeah,
yes, he does.
I noticed that.
So-
And he prevents a finger blasting and unwanted finger blasting, so it's like twofold.
Yeah.
Also, there's like 5 butts for the tally, so that was pretty good.
Yeah, we haven't been able to butt tally in a while because I've just been too mad.
I noticed.
Even some good gobby butts.
So, okay, here's a question from the point of view of like an audience that knows what is coming. Do you guys think that you were supposed to think this was Ned Leeds as Hobgoblin, or were you supposed to think it was Flash Thompson? Because if you notice,
Ned,
I think it's cool, but I mean, on page digital 26, they kind of leave it a little bit, up in the air, because Ned gets knocked down, and then he's like, "You'll pay for this, Thompson. I swear you'll pay." Then it cuts to Flash Thompson, and he's like, "I should have known that I couldn't depend on her when the chips were down. That miserable little witch. If I ever get my hands on her again." Then the next scene is somebody dressing up as Hobgoblin, and then they go and kidnap Shoshan. So, I mean, it's pretty clever.
I think it was supposed to be Ned Leeds, though, because they even Betty's conversation with Robbie, I think, kind of hints more towards that of like having like the undercover night assignments.
And he's like, "What the hell are you talking about?"
Yeah.
So do you think it's well, I'm not going to call it quite clever, but is it at least an attempt at being clever red herring?
Yeah, I think I mean, maybe it's easier to say again because we know. So like once I read that line about him having, a night shift, it's like, "Oh, there we go. There it is." So it does feel maybe a little up in the air still, and you can make arguments for either, but
we know because we have hindsight.
Know.
Yep. So okay, so I guess we have really mixed feelings about this book, but I'm gonna say, even though I appreciate the reprint of Amazing Fantasy 15, I'm gonna give this a negative recommendation. I don't think it's a great issue at all. Adam, what do you think?
Oh, really disliked it, and recommend not reading it at all.
Woo! All right, Joshua Mervell, what do you think?
I didn't like the issue, but I will say I kind of like that it was just a whole reprint of the first issue, like his origin, because it wasn't mixed in with other things happening, so I could just completely skip it. Where normally with his like backstory stuff, it's other characters talking about it and him like whining about Uncle Ben every issue, and I'm like, okay, I gotta quickly read through this so I can see if anything happens. At least with this, it's like, okay, I get it. I just scrolled super quick until I didn't see, until I saw that it went back to the regular issue and then started reading it again.
I personally like the reprint as is because I could read it and learn about Spidey's origin for the first time when I was 12. But anyway. G.I. Julie, do you recommend this issue?
Just
skip? Okay, skip it. All right, Bex Luthor.
Yeah, skip it. It's interesting how we went from one issue where Peter is being pretty mopey the whole time and praised it, and then this one we're just like, shut up. Stop whining. So you could really see the difference in the writing.
All right. Yeah. So I guess the 275th issue of Amazing. What did we call it? The Throw It in the Dumpster anniversary.
Yeah.
Big failure. But we're gonna see how this Hobgoblin thing plays out because we got some twists and turns coming very soon. So anyway, now we're gonna jump to Peter Parker, the all-new, all-daring Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man. And this is Aunt May's house under siege. Spidey in the crossfire, a house divided. Spidey is smashing through a window to stop a hooligan from shooting Aunt May in the back of the head. That's not quite what happens in the issue, but we'll get to that later. So
Before you go on, Mike, I just want to point out, according to the cover art, this hooligan is a huge Sting fan.
Yeah, that's super important.
That is
Or maybe
awesome.
he is Sting.
yeah.
Oh my! That's after he got off the set of Dune. Okay, it makes sense.
Unless this is supposed to be the wrestler Sting, which I'm sure you guys don't remember, but there was a wrestler in NWA named Sting as well. But
he's also blonde. He has the buzz cut. Either way, it makes sense.
Yeah. So so this issue basically we have what's the guy's name? Ernie.
Sting.
No, Ernie. So this is the guy who.
John.
I honestly mix these guys up, so it's very confusing because Nathan was involved with
mugged.
Yeah, Nathan got mugged, but this guy was also mugged, right? And he pulled the gun.
But he was mugged. Yeah, he was. Yeah, it was on the train and he shot those teenagers.
Right.
It's
Ernie. So now he's being chased by the press to like give like a piece of his story and blah blah blah. But anyway, so he gets away from them. We cut over to Spidey. He is trying to get information out of random people in the street about the Hobgoblin's back. Who is he? Blah blah blah. So then Peter goes into the Daily Bugle and he gets sent on an assignment to actually cover what's going on with Ernie. Coincidentally, Ernie lives with his aunt, so it kind of all works out in the end, right? And then we get this little cutover to Black Cat that doesn't really go anywhere, but I'm sure it'll come back in future issues. But this is where, and I know because I've read them, because I'm a loser. But anyway, so Black Cat mentions a character called the Foreigner, who we find out is kind of like a boogeyman in the underworld. He's this guy that Black Cat doesn't actually believe exists, but we're going to find out later that he does. So anyway, look at this, another subplot. This kid... whose father has been accused of being physically abusive by a teacher at school, and so there's a guy who's like, I don't know if he's is he a lawyer or he's like a social worker or something? Yeah, so he's just kind of there to like kind of assure the father that everything's going to be okay, and he knows he's not abusive. But then, sure enough, the father had been working on this disintegration ray invention, and the kid kind of got his hands on it, and the father was so pissed off that he clearly wants to beat the crap out of this kid. But the father sees the lawyer there, so he kind of just puts a show on for him and just pretends to like hug the kid. Really well done scene, actually, the art. Anyway, so then we cut over to Mary Jane coming home with his Aunt Anna. And then at the same time, Peter is walking with Joey Mercado because he's been sent on assignment here to kind of like take photos of Ernie. And when they get there, the house has already been surrounded by police because the same hooligans that Ernie pulled a gun on have invaded the house and have taken everybody hostage. And so now the rest of the issue is Peter Parker trying to figure out what to do, blah, blah, blah. So eventually he decides he's like, okay, this is it. I gotta, suit up as Spidey and get in there and figure out how I'm going to rescue Aunt May as well as everybody else. And so we kind of get some like banter between the different, the different friends that live there. They're all elderly, couples, and some of the recurring people like Nathan Lubinsky, who's May Parker's fiance. We get a nice slap across the face from Aunt May, whap, right, to one of the hooligans. And then Spider-Man makes his way in and ends up silently taking out all the different bad guys one by one until he gets to the big boss. And this is kind of a crucial scene because then what happens is Nathan, okay, so the guy he's got a gun pulled on Aunt May just as Spider-Man is coming into the room, and then Spider-Man webs up the bad guy's gun. Then Nathan pulls the blinds, which obviously exposes him to the cops outside. The cops shoot and kill him. And then the ending of the story is that Aunt May is upset with Nathan because she feels that Nathan kind of is like a little bit bloodthirsty. Like he was happy with the fact that the guy got killed. And so Aunt May doesn't know what to think about that. So then Peter Parker comes in and Peter's like all happy that obviously everyone's safe. And then Peter Parker's like, don't even say it, Aunt May. Don't cry. Come on. Like the man said, all's well that ends well. But we end on this shot of Nathan and Aunt May kind of like apart and not looking at each other because they've kind of just had this fight about how everything turned out. And yeah, I'm going to save my piece for the end. But again, I thought it was another really good story, a done-in-one story that focused on the characters and revealed the characters by what happens in the story. We'll start with you, Bex Luthor. What'd you think of this one?
This one was actually my favorite of the three, which is surprising because I vowed to never read the Peter Parker, the Spectacular Spider-Man ever again after that Santa Claus issue. No butts in this one. So, who is it? The same artist, by the way?
I can't remember. No, well, this is Bob McLeod. He's done a few issues, but he didn't do the last one, though. No.
Then we're all good.
Oh yeah, sorry, no, it's not Mark Beacom. I know the guy you're talking about. No, it's not him. No. Yeah.
I could tell because there's no butts. And the women in this issue have faces.
Not just asses.
Not just asses. No, I really, really did like this one. I love the kind of emphasis on Aunt May and her friends and the people who live with her, more so than like we're establishing more of a world and Peter's in this world, but there's so many other people who are a part of his life. I love that. I love that Aunt May and Peter are the same. Like she raised him to not kill anybody, and her fiance kind of was the reason why this guy was killed, and she can't handle that because she doesn't believe it's right. Mm-hmm. I really like that. I do like the stealth Peter. I think the black suit actually makes sense in this one for once. That's always nice. No, I did enjoy it a lot. I don't really have a whole lot to say. It was kind of like one done. I mean, I could do without some of the subplots, like
right.
What supervillain is this kid or is dad gonna turn into? Cool. Mm-hmm. I do like Black Cat's Robin Hooding though. I'm excited to see where that goes.
Right.
Where she was like, I can't wait to sell these diamonds to give the money to the orphanage. Like, that's great. You know what? She doesn't need a man. She's found her purpose, and it's orphanages and stealing. So good for her. I'm proud of her.
And did you? So you did like the art though?
I didn't dislike it. It wasn't very interesting to me. It was fine.
Okay.
I mean, I guess I just maybe a little bit too much going on for me.
Okay.
To enjoy. I don't know if it's just the scan that I was reading is a little muddy, but it just looked a little muddy. But I mean, I'd rather read this than last week, so.
All right.
It's fine.
Okay.
Yeah,
Joshua Ravel.
I think that I pretty much feel the same as Becca. There's a lot of really fun stuff in here. I love Peter being stealthy in this issue, kind of using his powers like they probably should be used.
Right.
Like creep around, crawl around on the ceiling and the walls like a spider, sneaking around, like webbing people up. Like normally he just swings in and starts punching. So this was a nice, almost refreshing take on him using his powers. As is normal for Peter Parker, there's a lot of just dialogue. There's so much to read in this issue. A lot of like needless thought bubbles of characters thinking about what they're literally doing. But all in all, this story was pretty good, especially after the tumble that was the death of Jean DeWolf, and then after that, the Santa Claus story. I was pleasantly surprised with this issue.
Yeah. All right. G.I. Jolie, what do you think?
This was great. It wasn't. I didn't like it as much as the first issue. Just and I only say that because of the side plots that they included.
Right.
I feel like the side plots kind of made the issue. Those are my knocks against it. Like I have no idea what's going on. Who these people are and why they're being introduced at a time like this. I mean, I see why you would cut to maybe Felicia, because she's been in Spider-Man before. So it sort of made sense. I was like, oh, are they bringing her back? And it felt good to read a Felicia with agency, even though that agency is thievery for the children.
Right.
I mean, if anything, for the children. I mean, it's for the children. I think it's hilarious. The majority of her inner monologue and outer monologue is complaining that she's been mistaken for Silver Sable.
Because who wants that?
Right? She's like, who's that bitch? Not me. I'm doing this for the kids. But, okay, so, like, even if there was one cutaway and it was just Black Cat doing her crime thing for the kids, that would have made sense. But then they cut away immediately after that to people I've never seen before, to to a subplot that goes nowhere. And it's like, I don't like that. This isn't a movie. This is not going to conclude at the end of this issue. Why do this? And I feel like we always talk about what movies and books do differently or what they do well compared to the others. They do this in movies for a reason, because they wrap up that subplot.
Right.
Or in a serialized television show, for example. Yes, the comic books are serialized for the most part, but it doesn't make sense to do it here, because if I was a kid in the 80s, there is a very good chance I'm going to miss this wrapping up.
Yep, good point.
Or I'm going to miss this happening.
Right.
And read whatever happened to him later.
Normally in TV shows too, though, like when they're hinting at something, it usually has something to do with what's going on. You know what I mean? Like maybe Black Cat stopped those guys or went in and stole those diamonds, and it was the main bad guy that we were following at the beginning when he like steals the jewelry off of the woman on the train. Maybe instead of that, he just gets done dropping off these diamonds that he stole from a jewelry store and then leaves, and then we see Black Cat come in and steal them back to you know what I mean? So it's like somewhat connected. So there's a reason why we're getting like a tidbit of her story and then moving on. It kind of reminded me of like Age of Ultron when Thor goes and takes a bath and learns about Infinity War.
Oh yeah.
And it's like why was this here? This literally has nothing to do. And obviously it makes sense when you're thinking about Infinity War. Like, okay, yeah, it's like, you know, it's explaining other things that are going on, but it has literally nothing to do with what's happening right now. So it really pushes you out of the story.
I think this was a trend. Like, even if you go back and watch Star Trek Next Generation, which is great, they somehow got into this trend where sometimes they'd have an episode that didn't have enough to fill 1 hour. So they would just have like half and half. Like, half the story is about Data, you know, having dreams, and the other half is about Troy meeting her mother again or whatever. And there was no connection. And the whole time you're watching it, you're waiting for the connection, right? Because naturally you expect everything to tie together. But when it doesn't, it's really frustrating. And I think that's why these subplots don't work here, right? Because your brain wants them. You're like, oh, there's got to be a connection. Maybe it's the same guy. No, it's not the same guy. Okay.
Well, and especially after we read about, you know, abusive Flash Thompson, we get to abusive father. It's like, great. Cool.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was just coming away from that and stepped into this, and then to learn that it doesn't get resolved or mentioned again in this story, it was kind of
right. Adam, what'd you think of this one? Hello?
Did we lose him?
Uh-oh. Hello, Adam. Are you still with us?
Hello, I am here. If you can hear me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Sounds
Sorry,
like you're on
I got
Mars.
lost in the spec. A little bit. I got lost. There was a Spider-Man that was chasing me. Okay, so I'm going to give you my 2 cents on this. And it's nothing too original. This issue was fantastic.
All right.
So here's my whole thing. It's the same exact argument I made for the first comic we talked about, Web. Because we have Spider-Man. He is going through character development. We're seeing interpersonal relationships. We're not seeing fighting a big bad.
Good
point.
point.
So I think I don't really need to add too much more. Everything that was great about Web of Spider-Man is done well in here with the addition of great art. I love the pencils in this issue.
Yes.
So I will say, even with the ramifications of these minor subplots that don't go anywhere, which create some weakness, other than that, no, it's fantastic. I think if it was not for those subplots, this would be the strongest issue this week. But even with that said, I'm going to step away saying I highly recommend this issue.
Yeah, and I do want to point out the art it's kind of that Bob McLeod style is one of those ones where if you don't pay attention, it kind of just passes you by. But if you really look closely, you realize how subtle his facial expressions are, and he's just a really, like, he's not the most dynamic action artist, but he reminds me more of like Kurt Swan on Superman. He just really focuses on body language and character and facial expressions and stuff like that. So yeah, I think Bob McLeod's really, really good. So yeah, go ahead, Jolie.
Well, I'm just thinking about this, and one of the things that they taught us in drawing is that, like, there are two types of bodies that you have to pay more attention to, because if you get them wrong, you get them really wrong, and that's children and the elderly. And the elderly, I mean, this book is about the elderly. It's all of Aunt May's roommates / friends, and like the one. Bob McLeod just does it so well. The scene where the bad guy is like, well, let me introduce you to my friends, and he calls himself like John, Ringo, George, etc. And he's talking about Ringo, who is like upstairs in the upstairs bedroom he's upstairs with your friend, the Cat in the Hat. This is the most cinematic part of the book, which was funny. But like, he's like, the bad guy says to the quote Cat in the Hat, "You were there when Thompson hit that homer? I don't believe it." I don't get the baseball reference. It's meant to be old, like probably like an old World Series reference.
Right.
And then the old guy says, "So don't." And his whole body is saying, "So don't."
Yeah.
And it's you don't often get like the body language matching matching the dialogue. And I think a friend of ours, Jeff Chapman, said it this once as well, is that once you notice it can't be unseen, it's hard to look at art where the mouths aren't open. When there's dialogue bubbles, it just doesn't seem, you know what I mean? Like, for
right.
people who are drawing action, and there's the main action is them usually speaking, to have drawn a face that doesn't reflect the action of speaking. This book, he's like, it's a little bit weird that their mouths aren't open, they're just poses. But in this book, it's like they're at the end of the sentence, or they're in the middle of the sentence, and he actually draws characters speaking. And I think I agree with Becca that it's muddy. The scan that I read is terrible too, but the art is so good. I'm with Adam on the pencils. He's phenomenal.
And I just want to say one thing. The greatest panel I've ever seen Aunt May in, slapping that hoodlum. It is fantastic. And beyond that, I mean, yes, it's a ridiculous image, but at the same time, the dynamic of it, you can actually feel the propulsion of her hand.
Right.
Like, even just in terms of the medium itself, it's done well. Plus, I'm so accustomed to Aunt May being this, like, fragile thing where if, a slight breeze hits her, she's going to go into a coma. It's so great her actually asserting herself.
Right.
And then doing it twice, like putting herself in peril twice.
This slap almost made up for the Flash Thompson slap.
and I also want to say one more thing about the baseball scene. I love the fact that it's one panel, two bubbles, and nothing is explained. There's no stupid, asterisks with they're referring to the 1967 World Series. No, you just have the dialogue, you cut away, and you know that they've been talking for 20 minutes about baseball. They somehow got to this and blah, blah, blah. And it shows how old the one guy is. It shows how much of a dick the hooligan is. It's great, right? Like, that's subtle characterization there. It's really well done. You're right. Yeah, I love this issue. I don't know which one's my favorite, this one or Web of Spider-Man, but they're both really good. So I obviously recommend this one. Obviously. Adam, do you recommend this one?
Oh, highly. Like I said, if we read more issues where we actually get character development for the characters rather than just Spider-Man fighting a battle against another random villain that he's going to win, or there's going to be a stalemate to be continued in the next issue, this would captivate my interest much more. And I think, like you alluded to, Mike, these are those hidden gems that you find. They don't get talked about. They're not big milestones, but they're what made reading these comics worthwhile when they were being published. That's
right, and that's also why this is my favorite era of Spidey. And, we got more Peter David comics to come, so we'll have you on again soon for sure. Joshua Mervell, what did you think of this one? Or, do you recommend it? Sorry.
I do recommend it. Mike, I think maybe this is it. This is what you've been talking about this whole time.
There you go.
The 80s era being the best era for Spider-Man. Like, this was a super great one. Besides some of those rough patches of either, like, long unneeded dialogue or the weird subplots that are building up to something else that have nothing to do with this. It was really fun, a really good issue with Spidey using his powers in like a way that a person with spider powers would use them. The characterization of Aunt May and all of the people in her home, like it was great.
So it's kind of like when you recommend a TV show to someone and you're like, you just got to skip the first 94 episodes and then it gets good,
yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Okay. Bex Luthor, what do you think? Do you recommend this one?
Yeah, no, definitely. This was my favorite one that we've read in a while, and it just blows my mind that what it came right after.
Right.
But it also came after that scene where Peter's talking to his suit like it's like his other personality, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is one of the better things that I've read in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
So I do understand where you're coming from, Mike. I love comic books. You know I love comic books. I love old comic books. It's just I wish I could have read them when you read them so that I could have enjoyed them more, because when like you can't get past the female anatomy sometimes, or the racism and the sexism, it just pulls me out of it. But so I kind of wish I had a more innocent mindset going into this to enjoy it more. But then there's stuff like this where no hate crimes are happening and I can actually enjoy the comic.
Right. Did we get everyone's recommendations then? Did everyone?
Jolie.
G.I. Jolie, do you recommend this one?
Yeah. I think I said it sort of the same as the story. I said it at the same time I was giving my review, but yes, I recommend it for it. I didn't realize how long it would take for us to get to the Spider-Man comics that you were talking about so highly. But I'm glad that we're here, and I hope that it doesn't end. I really sincerely hope that it doesn't end, because I'm going to feel terrible if next week is just back to that weird status quo, not stuff.
We shall see, because we are going to be reviewing Amazing Spider-Man number 276. Follow up to this story. Let's hope it's better, right? And we're also going to be reading Peter Parker number 114 and Web of Spider-Man 14. We're going to have a special guest that we just confirmed. Josie Murphy will be joining us.
Ooh.
Oh,
most of us know Josie. Yeah, from book club, or movie club. So yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. So be sure to join us again next week, because I can pretty much say that it's going to be more good stuff and maybe a little bit of bad stuff, but mostly good stuff. But yeah, Josh, you can take it from here.
Yeah, thank you guys so much for listening to the podcast. It really helps when you leave us a review over on Apple Podcasts, or you can drop us a line on Twitter at HCTSpidercast. Please let us know what you guys think about the comics we're talking about and the podcast itself. We definitely want to keep that comics conversation going.
That's right, and also we want to thank Adam Peltier for joining us. Adam, we'll definitely have you back on again soon, if you will.
Yes, of course.
Awesome.
Perfect.
All right, so until next Monday, Spider friends,
disperse.
go for it.